The night was alive with fury. Rain pounded the pavement like an unrelenting drum, pooling into dark rivers along the deserted streets. Thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the ground beneath Jake's feet. The air smelled of wet earth and something else, something old and forgotten. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, shivering as the wind howled through the empty town, carrying whispers of secrets long buried. At the very end of the street, barely visible through the downpour, stood the house. Its roof sagged under years of neglect, and vines curled around its rusted gates like skeletal fingers. The windows, some broken, others clouded with dust, seemed to watch him. No lights, no movement. Yet something about the place made the hair on his arms rise. It wasn't just abandoned, it was waiting. Jake had heard the stories. The townsfolk spoke in hushed voices about the guardian, a German shepherd that never left the property. Some said it had once belonged to the house's last owner, a man who vanished under suspicious circumstances. Others claimed it was just a stray, protecting something only it understood. But one thing remained consistent. No one dared approach the house at night. Jake, however, wasn't like the others. He needed the truth. His career was circling the drain. One more failed story, and he'd be out of a job. This town, this house, this dog was his last chance to prove himself. If he could uncover the truth behind the legend, it would be the break he needed. He adjusted his camera bag and exhaled. Legends were just stories, right? Jake took his first step forward, determined to unravel the mystery. His boots squelched in the mud as he crossed the threshold of the rusted gate. The wind seemed to die down as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then, his flashlight flickered, its beam sputtering against the heavy darkness. A deep, guttural growl rumbled through the air. Jake froze. He wasn't alone. From the shadows beneath the porch, two eyes glowed like embers in the night. They didn't blink, they didn't move, they just watched. A warning, a challenge. For the first time that night, Jake felt something colder than the storm, a presence, heavy and unyielding. The guardian was real, and it was waiting for him to make his next move. Jake took a cautious step forward, his breath fogging in the cold night air. The wooden porch creaked beneath his weight. Then, from the darkness, a low, guttural growl rolled out like a warning drum. He froze. The sound wasn't a threat, it was a statement. "Do not come any closer." The air was thick with damp wood and something musky, something alive. Jake swallowed hard, his fingers gripping the strap of his camera bag. His instincts told him to turn back, but his curiosity refused to let him walk away. The shadows shifted, and then he saw it. A German shepherd emerged from the darkness, stepping into the weak glow of the flickering street lamp. His ribs jutted out beneath a thick but unkempt coat, his eyes dark pools of something deeper than mere survival. He was a creature of discipline, of purpose, yet exhaustion clung to him like an old wound. The dog's ears twitched, and his tail remained stiff, poised between fight and flight. He wasn't just guarding this place, he belonged to it. Bruno didn't charge, didn't snap his teeth. He simply barked, a sharp and deliberate sound that echoed through the empty street. He paced the porch with methodical precision, every movement a calculated effort to maintain control. Jake had seen plenty of stray dogs before, but there was something different about this one. He wasn't looking for food, he wasn't lost. He was a sentry, bound by duty to something unseen. The question clawed at Jake's mind. What was he protecting? The next morning, Jake visited the nearest diner, hoping the locals had answers. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a knowing smile, sighed when he mentioned the dog. "Bruno?" she muttered. pouring his coffee. Been guarding that place since old Mr. Holloway disappeared. What, 10 years now? Won't let nobody near it. Won't take food, won't take shelter. Another man chimed in from the counter, shaking his head. Tried to bring him in during the last winter storm, nearly lost a hand in it. Jake leaned in, intrigued. So, he just stays there? For a decade? The waitress nodded, like he's waiting for someone or something. The thought unsettled Jake. Dogs moved on when their owners left, but Bruno hadn't. Instead, he had dedicated himself to that house, despite starvation, despite the cold. Was it loyalty? Grief? Or was there something inside that house worth guarding? He glanced out the diner window, back toward the property shrouded in mist. The mystery wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the unyielding devotion of the dog standing watch. The sun dipped below the horizon as Jake made his way back to the abandoned house. The townspeople's warnings clung to him, but they only fueled his resolve. Something inside that house mattered to Bruno, and Jake intended to find out what. He reached the rusted gate, gripping the iron bars. Bruno was there, waiting, watching. The dog didn't growl this time. Instead, as Jake stepped closer, Bruno took a slow, deliberate step to the side. An invitation or a final warning? Jake's heart pounded as he reached for the door handle, ready to uncover the truth. Jake crouched at a safe distance, extending his hand with a piece of dried meat. His breath misted in the cold air as he waited, motionless. Bruno, the wary German shepherd, stood just a few feet away, his body tense, eyes locked onto Jake's offering. The silence between them was heavy, charged with hesitation. Jake didn't speak, didn't move, just let the moment stretch, offering patience instead of force. Bruno's ears flicked forward, then back. A test. Would this human be different? Seconds ticked by before the dog shifted, ever so slightly, paws crunching the frost-dusted ground. Trust, however fragile, had begun to form. Bruno hesitated, muscles coiled like springs, before inching closer. The hunger gnawed at his ribs, but fear held him back. Jake stayed still, resisting the urge to speak. A single wrong move, a breath too deep, could send Bruno retreating again. Then, with a deep sniff, the dog's wet nose brushed against Jake's fingers. It was fleeting, but enough. A moment passed before Bruno snatched the food and darted back. Jake exhaled, a small smile tugging at his lips. It wasn't much, but it was progress. A step forward. One day, maybe, Bruno wouldn't run. One day, maybe, he'd stay. As Jake stepped onto the porch, he noticed the eerie silence. The house, long abandoned, seemed to hold its breath. The wooden boards beneath his boots creaked softly, the sound swallowed by the stillness. Bruno followed, his paws silent on the weathered planks. The air was thick, not just with dust, but with something heavier, memories lingering like ghosts. Jake touched the rusting doorknob, feeling the cold seep into his skin. It wasn't just an empty house. It was a place frozen in time. The question clawed at him. Who had lived here before? And why did it feel like they never truly left? Inside, the house was a graveyard of forgotten moments. Dust clung to picture frames on the mantel, obscuring the faces of a family long gone. A coat still hung by the door, moth-eaten but untouched, as if waiting for someone to slip it on again. Jake ran his fingers over the edge of a wooden table, tracing the scratches left behind by time and use. Bruno padded forward, his nose twitching, taking in the sense of a life that had once thrived here. A single cup sat on the counter, its rim chipped. It was as if the people who lived here had simply vanished, leaving behind whispers of what once was. Bruno whimpered suddenly, his ears flattening as he moved toward a small rocking chair in the corner. He nudged it gently with his nose, and the wood groaned as it swayed. Jake frowned. Something about the way Bruno lingered there, his gaze fixed, sent a chill through him. The dog's whimpers deepened, his tail tucked low. Jake knelt beside him, eyes scanning the chair. It was old, its paint peeling, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. And yet, Bruno's reaction told another story. Someone had sat here once. Someone Bruno had known. The air grew heavy with something unspoken, an unseen presence that neither of them could shake. Jake's eyes drifted toward a door at the back of the room. Unlike the rest of the house, this one was sealed tight, its edges lined with rust and age. A shiver ran down his spine. Something about it felt wrong. Bruno noticed it too. The dog's posture stiffened, his gaze locking onto the door like a predator sensing danger. Jake approached slowly, placing a hesitant hand on the handle. It wouldn't budge. Locked. He exhaled, stepping back. Why would someone lock a basement door in an abandoned house? His stomach twisted. He should turn away, leave it alone. But Bruno's low growl told him otherwise. Something was down there, something that wasn't meant to be forgotten. Bruno's paws scraped against the wood, claws raking deep as he whined, the sound raw and urgent. Jake's pulse quickened. The dog wasn't just curious, he was desperate. "What is it, boy?" Jake murmured, kneeling beside him. The air around the door was different, colder somehow. He pressed his ear against the wood, holding his breath. Silence, then scratch, faint. But there, his blood ran cold. There was something or someone on the other side. Bruno barked, his tail rigid. Jake's fingers curled into fists. He wasn't the type to scare easy, but this was different. His gut screamed at him to run, but he couldn't. Not now. Not when someone, needed him. Jake swallowed hard, his heart hammering. He had a choice. Walk away and pretend he never saw the door, or force it open and face whatever lay beneath. Bruno whined again, pawing at the wood. He had made his choice already. Jake's fingers tightened around the rusted handle. He took a breath, then another. His pulse roared in his ears. With one final glance at Bruno, he braced himself and shoved. The wood groaned, resisting. One more push. The crack of breaking hinges echoed through the house. The door swung open, revealing only darkness. A darkness that felt alive. Jake hesitated, the air thick with something unseen. He exhaled sharply. "All right, boy, let's see what's down there." Jake forces the crowbar between the cracks, his knuckles white with strain. Sweat beads on his forehead as he leans his full weight into it, the wood groaning in protest. Bruno paces anxiously beside him, ears flattened, a low whimper escaping his throat. With a final, determined heave, the rotting wood gives way, snapping loose with a sickening crack. The door swings open, revealing a void of absolute darkness. The air is thick, stale, untouched for years. Bruno lets out a soft, uneasy growl. Jake swallows hard, his flashlight cutting through the suffocating blackness as he steps inside. A wave of putrid air hits Jake like a punch to the gut, thick with the scent of decay and forgotten time. He staggers back, gagging, his arm instinctively raising to shield his nose. Bruno flinches, ears flattening against his skull. The dog's body stiffens, nostrils flaring as he takes in the overwhelming scent. Jake steadies himself, his flashlight trembling in his grip as he forces himself to breathe through his mouth. The room ahead is cloaked in shadow, but something is waiting within. The beam of light flickers over damp, mold-ridden walls, illuminating a space that feels untouched by time. Cobwebs dangle like forgotten memories, dust swirling in protest of their sudden disturbance. Bruno takes cautious steps forward, his paws pressing into the thick layer of grime coating the floor. Jake follows, scanning the room with growing unease. There's something unnatural about the stillness here, something heavy. Then his light catches on a small shape in the corner, something that doesn't belong. His stomach tightens. Jake's flashlight lands on a frail, tiny skeleton curled in the corner, its delicate frame frozen in time. A tattered stuffed bear is clutched between its brittle fingers, its fur long faded and matted with dust. The sight steals the breath from his lungs. His hands tremble as realization crashes over him. This isn't just an abandoned room. This was a child's final resting place, a tomb sealed in silence. Bruno whines slowly, creeping forward, his nose barely brushing against the small figure. Jake's chest tightens as his throat goes dry. Who was she? And why was she here alone? Scattered near the remains, crumpled newspaper clippings whisper secrets from the past. Jake picks one up, the yellowed paper fragile beneath his fingertips. The headline blares, "Local girl vanishes without a trace. Family desperate for answers." His pulse thunders as he scans the page, his gaze landing on the grainy image of a bright-eyed little girl. Recognition claws at his mind. He's seen this face before. The room spins, he pieces it together. Bruno had been guarding something far more than a secret. He had been standing vigil over a tragedy that the world had long forgotten. Bruno steps forward, his body trembling, eyes locked onto the fragile remains. He lowers his head, pressing his nose gently against the stuffed bear, nudging it as if willing life back into its long-lost owner. A heartbreaking whimper escapes him, followed by a deep, mournful howl that fills the empty house, echoing through the decaying walls. Jake's throat tightens. This wasn't just a place of death. It was a place of unwavering loyalty. For years, Bruno had stayed, guarding, remembering, mourning. Jake stares at the locked room, realization sinking in like a cold weight. This little girl was never lost. She had been hidden, her story buried beneath years of silence. His fists clench, his mind racing. Someone knew, someone let this happen. He looks at Bruno, the dog's eyes filled with sorrow and understanding. The truth had been here all along, waiting to be uncovered. But what now? What was he supposed to do with this knowledge that changed everything? Jake stands frozen, the weight of the discovery pressing heavily upon him. He knows he has a choice: to turn away, let this remain another forgotten tragedy, or to dig deeper, to find out who was responsible. Bruno watches him intently, his silent, unwavering presence urging him forward. This dog had spent years waiting for someone to listen, for someone to finally see. Jake exhales, a sense of purpose settling within him. He couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything Bruno had endured. He turns toward the door. It was time to uncover the truth. The wail of sirens cut through the heavy silence as red and blue lights flashed against the old abandoned house. Officers stepped out cautiously, their faces hardening as Jake, his voice steady but strained, recounted every detail. His hands trembled as he pointed toward the basement entrance. The lead detective, a stern woman with sharp eyes, nodded grimly and signaled her team forward. As they descended, the weight of what lay ahead settled upon them. Moments later, a sickening hush fell over the room as they emerged, one carrying a small, crumbling skeleton wrapped in faded fabric. Bruno let out a long, mournful whimper, his body pressing against Jake's leg. Word spread quickly. Reporters swarmed, townspeople whispering in hushed tones. The forensic team confirmed what many had long suspected. The remains belonged to Emily Carter, the mayor's daughter who had vanished decades ago. Her disappearance had been a wound left to fester, dismissed as a tragic accident with no closure. Now, with undeniable evidence unearthed, the truth clawed its way back to the surface. The town, once quiet and complacent, was forced to confront its past. Jake stood by, watching as history unraveled before his eyes, knowing this was only the beginning. As officials dug deeper, a chilling narrative emerged. Yellowed newspaper clippings resurfaced, old headlines that had once declared Emily's disappearance an unfortunate tragedy. But tucked within the archives were buried reports, conflicting testimonies, and whispers of foul play. Has someone orchestrated her silence? Has justice been intentionally delayed? The mayor, a once beloved figure, had died years ago, leaving behind a legacy that now reeked of deception. The town, reeling from the revelation, was left with more questions than answers. Through it all, one truth remained undeniable. Bruno had never abandoned his post. For years he had sat by the basement door, waiting, watching, protecting a soul long gone. Townspeople who once dismissed him as a nuisance now viewed him with reverence. This wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian, a silent keeper of a painful truth. His loyalty, unwavering and pure, became the town's symbol of perseverance. Strangers knelt beside him, murmuring soft words of gratitude, their hands resting gently on his graying fur. Jake stared at his notes, his laptop screen glowing in the dim motel room. The biggest story of his career lay before him, a scandal that would shake the town to its core. The temptation was undeniable, but as he glanced at Bruno, curled up at his feet, another thought took hold. This wasn't just about corruption or long-buried secrets. This was about love. Love so profound that it defied time, expectation, and reason. Did the world need another story of deceit, or did it need a reminder of devotion's enduring power? The next morning, Jake's article hit the headlines, not as an exposé, but as a tribute. The Dog Who Waited, a story of unwavering love. He detailed Bruno's silent vigil, the years spent guarding a truth that no one else had dared to uncover. The world took notice. Messages poured in from strangers moved by Bruno's story. Offers for adoption, donations, and tributes flooded the town. It wasn't about crime or corruption anymore. It was about the depth of an animal's love, pure, unconditional, and undying. Jake looked at Bruno, the old dog's eyes filled with both wisdom and weariness. "You've done enough," he murmured, scratching behind his ears. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Bruno curled up in the back seat of Jake's car, his tired body finally at ease. No longer a lonely sentinel guarding the past, he had found a home. A place where he wouldn't have to wait anymore. And for the first time in years, as the car drove toward a future unknown, Bruno let out a contented sigh, knowing he was finally where he belonged. Bruno's unwavering devotion proves that love knows no boundaries, not even death. Even in the absence of his beloved owner, he remained at the same spot, waiting, watching, longing for a return that would never come. But his patience was not in vain. In his eyes, love wasn't about presence, it was about faith. And as the years passed, the town came to see Bruno not as just a dog, but as a living testament to loyalty, an unbreakable bond that even time itself could not erase. Despite years of deception, the hidden truth surfaced, thanks to Bruno's persistence. His refusal to leave the grave, his silent cries in the night, these were more than mere habits. They were clues, echoes of a story that had been buried along with his master. When the truth finally emerged, it wasn't just a revelation, it was vindication. Bruno's unwavering faith had ensured that the past would not be forgotten. Bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes in the form of silent, patient devotion. Bruno never barked for attention, never sought recognition. Yet his quiet resilience told a story louder than words. While others saw a stray, those who truly looked saw a guardian. His loyalty had not only revealed the truth, but had also protected it, proving that true heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they simply wait. Jake realizes that some stories aren't about uncovering scandals, but about honoring true loyalty. He arrived seeking a mystery, expecting a sensational tale. Instead, he found something far greater, a lesson in love, patience, and devotion. As he walked away, he knew Bruno's story wasn't about loss. It was about a love that never fades, ever.